Alongside the Insiders, Pierre LeBrun and Chris Johnson, day 2 of the NHL General Managers meetings. The first session of the morning, gentlemen, just broke up a few moments ago. Had an opportunity to speak to a number of the GMs that were coming out of that meeting, and some very interesting things unfolded in this morning's sessions, Pierre.
Yeah, so New Jersey Devils GM, President of Hockey Operations, Tom Fitzgerald, spoke to the group this morning, and he shared with them his experience as a hockey father. His son, Casey Fitzgerald, on December 28th in a game for AHL Hartford, suffered a very scary injury to his neck from a skate cut and needed surgery. Obviously, Tom Fitzgerald was watching the game on his phone with his wife as it happened. Wasn't quite sure what happened at first, but then realized what was going on. And, you know, Tom Fitzgerald showing the pictures to me from that night, and it's very scary, as we know. Luckily, Casey Fitzgerald obviously made a full recovery. But what Tom Fitzgerald shared with us here this morning was that he got choked up as he talked to the group about, you know, living through that. And his message to the group was, is there a way to get to our players to ask them, how would it make it feel to your parents if they saw that? Because we know that neck guards are not mandated in the NHL. Now, Casey Fitzgerald was wearing a neck guard because they're mandated in the American Hockey League, but the incident was higher up near the jaw that in that case it didn't make a difference, but it leads to a bigger conversation for sure. And the irony, before I lead this to CJ, is that Tom Fitzgerald, even before this incident, was among the NHL GMs on the committee for cut-resistant equipment that was formed last year. So, you know, some pretty heavy stuff here, and really good of Tom Fitzgerald to share that experience with the group today.
And that's the sort of thing that makes a difference, right? I mean, we're, in my view, at the tipping point of this particular point of history where it's inevitable the NHL will have mandates for cut protective equipment. It's just really a question of when. And we don't have that answer yet. It could be as soon as next season still. There's time for that to happen, but obviously it has to be reached with the NHLPA. But you go back to the death of Adam Johnson at the game in England back in October 2023. Since that time, we've seen mandates in many leagues like the AHL, the ECHL, as you mentioned, Pierre, internationally. There's a lot more equipment being produced, different types of equipment. I mean, really, that was a changing point, and yet these incidents still happen. There was a couple serious ones in the Western Hockey League recently, the Casey Fitzgerald injury. And I think sometimes those personal stories, you know, the evidence is right in front of you, but those personal stories really connect and maybe make a difference. And so, you know, I think it'll be interesting to see how the other GMs heard that, what the league officials think like, because as I say, this is happening. It's sort of like visors many years ago. It was talked about and talked about and talked about. Then it happened. His grandfather didn't. No one thinks about it. I think that's what will eventually happen here.
Are we in a situation right now where the indication I seem to get, and correct if I'm wrong, guys, is that the NHL is fully on board with this? The NHL is saying, this is where we want to go. This is what we want to see happen. And right now is just getting the acceptance from the NHLPA standpoint.
Yeah, it is. And it's kind of it's a culture shift. It's making NHL players comfortable with wearing that sort of equipment.
But they're growing up in junior playing.
They are, and part of what the manufacturers are trying to come up with is the kind of equipment that doesn't make you sweat more, that's comfortable, that, you know, the players will complain over the years about overheating with certain equipment. And so the technology keeps changing, and the manufacturers are trying to get to a place where the players will wear this without feeling like they're like it's a burden.
Well, and it's not just neck protection, right? It's protection for the wrists and for the Achilles. And especially when you get to wrist guards, I mean, some of the best shooters in the world maybe don't feel comfortable if they haven't grown up and gotten used to that. And I think, you know, we're talking about men at the end of the day. And as much as I could sit here and say, yeah, it's common sense, wear all the protection available, guys. We don't want this sort of serious incident happening. You know, they still have the ability to choose that. And that's really what the PA, I think, is protecting. They're not saying this is a bad idea. We should be clear. It's more that they're protecting the right of their membership to make those individual choices. Right. And as I say, I think the choice will be taken out of the future generations. It's just, when does that moment happen?
So at the end of the day, I think everybody's on the same page that we think this is where we should be headed. This is where we are headed. So it's a matter of when and no longer if we see cut-resistant equipment in the National Hockey League.